the thanks and the greetings of the President and the members of the International Court of Justice. I've been asked to say a few words on international terrorism, which is the main theme of this conference. And I would start by saying that judges, and especially judges of the International Court of Justice, are not normally persons charged with the effective combat of terrorism. That is something left to those who are better suited to that job. But our job, and that I think of most judges the world over, is to ensure that this combating of terrorism is done in a way that does not sacrifice the rule of law and does not take too much away from the civil liberties that civilized society, organized society, is entitled to. The recent outrage in Bombay is a reason for the condemnation that it has received, and I join, of course, wholeheartedly in that. At the same time, I think we will not be doing ourselves any service if the message that is to come out of this conference is one of fear-mongering or general sweeping statements in this area of the clash of civilizations. The effective combating of terrorism requires cooperation, not only among states, but among civilizations. And this is the message that I would like to leave in this conference. Not of fear-mongering, and not of hate, and not of revenge. Because apart from anything else, if we don't pay attention to these things, we will be wrongly analyzing the phenomena, and we will not come up with the solution. My dear friend, Minister Jeff Malani, has spoken of the rise of Wahhabism in the 17th century. For his information, it was in the 18th century. Of course, a century or less is probably something that one would be very careful apart, at least to the meticulous. And I think scholarship, especially when you are studying something like the history of Islam, is much more complex than the simplistic picture of people killing so that they will get to paradise to meet persons of the other sex. That is something that I cannot address in 5 minutes. I simply say that there is a lot in common that we all have in a wish to fight terrorism. I will just quote one treaty that I came across recently. A treaty signed in 1401 between the Viceroy of Egypt on the one hand and the Italian Republic, the Republic of Amalfi. And it was on the suppression of piracy in the Mediterranean. The pirates were described as people who neither belonged to Muslims nor to Christians. And I saw these examples so that we remember something that is too obvious, that it sometimes tends to be overseen, that the problem of terrorism or nihilism or violence is not a recent one. All societies have had to deal with that thing, whether they were the nihilists of the 19th century or much older ones, even in classical times. And of course, terrorism has to be combated. But it can be combated also by a combination of methods, by cooperation among states, by addressing the underlying causes, by preaching a message of love and forgiveness, and getting to the and speaking to the other across borders, not by fear-mongering. I would have been content to have just expressed my gratitude, which is very sincere, Madam President, for being here. But I thought that I should also say a few words on this theme, and I would reiterate my gratitude to you all for your hospitality
Thank you indeed, sir. I now request Honorable Union Minister for Law and Justice, Dr. M. Veerappa Moily, to kindly address the gathering.
Esteemed Pratibha Dev Singh Patil ji, the Honorable President of India, Honorable Dr. Justice K.G. Balakrishnan, the Chief Justice of India, my esteemed friend Sri V. Narayan Swamy, Union Minister, Justice Chan Sek Chong, Chief Justice of Singapore, Justice Kasawani, Judge of the International Court of Justice, my esteemed friend Sri Bhupendra Singh Hooda, my colleague Mr. Ram Jethmalani, Mr. Rajesh Agarwal, the key figure in organizing this week of the International Conference of Jurists, judges of the Supreme Court, judges of the High Court, Solicitor General, esteemed, distinguished delegates of this great event of the International Conference of Jurists. You are now dealing with an important subject, the subject of international terrorism. I must make it very clear to all of you here that India firmly believes on the policy of non-alignment. It's a well-tested policy, and this policy cannot be shaken by any provocation, by any country or by any individual. The views expressed by my senior colleague, Mr. Ram Jethmalani, are not the views of the government, and we entirely disagree with the views which are expressed by him, with all harmony. The terrorism has no religion at all. It's totally wrong to attribute terrorism to any religion, and no religion speaks of terrorism or propagates terrorism. And hatred breeds hatred. And that is the root cause of many of the maladies that is facing our country or the international field. Thus far, no country today is immune to the threat and impact of terrorism. As the world has moved rapidly to a global economy, over the past 50 years, the methods of terrorism have become more sophisticated, ranging from mass murder and the threat of weapons of mass destruction to so-called cyber terrorism. The vast majority of the world's population want nothing more than to live in peace, not in violence or not in hatred. Terrorism costs billions globally in various ways, ranging from the loss of income producing family members to huge costs in security requirements, reallocation of government funds, losses to private business. No country can succeed alone in mounting counter-terrorism efforts, for we live today in an interdependent world community. Ultimately, The only hope of success in reducing terrorism lies in the cooperation among countries and international organizations involved in fighting terrorism. Not only the cooperation between the state to state or country to country, the cooperation of the minds of the people. This is an occasion when you can again reaffirm yourself, all of us, to develop that kind of a world culture against hatred, against violence, and against terrorism. Welfare by proxy reappeared on the world stage on massive scale in 1960s and 70s. Today, along with the terrorism, it has considerably altered nature of global terrorist activities. Some countries have embraced terrorism as deliberate instrument of foreign policy. Ultimately, it will not or they will not succeed. The attempt by narcotics traffickers to influence the politics of the government, a systematic threat used by violence. This is also cause of terrorism. During the 90s, many conflicts, violence increased throughout the world, and more terrorist groups began to operate across borders. In 1999, there were more than 150 international terrorist attacks. September 11, 2001 brought international terrorism to US soil and changed the way the Western world responded to this form of terrorism. International terrorism involves mobilization and movement of men, material and resources across multiple countries and thus different legal jurisdictions. Countries can respond to global terrorism only by lawful means, through municipal laws or international legal instruments. This is what we need to combat, how we can combat terrorism. We need to find ourselves, and domestically and internationally. Comprehensive framework of international legal instruments that harmonize the substantive and procedural laws of various countries is the only means of enabling a successful and speedy response to global acts of terrorism. Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, in July 2009, proposed a comprehensive convention on international terrorism at the Non-Aligned Movement Summit in Egypt. The convention will bind countries to an internationally accepted definition of terrorism and abide by a code of conduct dealing with the issue of trans-border terrorism. India plays an important role in showing the way forward to fight against global terrorism. India has been a victim of terrorism since independence, but the past decade has seen the violence escalate to new heights. Innocent lives have been lost across the country, in both small towns and major cities, due to activities by international terrorists. Recognizing the dynamic nature of global terrorism and the difficulty in confronting it in India, as India has put in place new and effective solutions, including a national investigation agency that can operate across jurisdictions of local enforcement in various states within India. New initiative aimed at better intelligence gathering and coordination across various agencies. India has always conformed to international law and tenets enshrined in its constitution responded to threat of terror. Respecting the pluralistic nature of our democratic republic has always been our first priority. Hence, we have always refrained from irresponsible reactions or provocation to acts of terrorism. We need to respond well under any circumstances. In spite of being a victim of major terrorist attacks,